You've all heard ghost stories, but you've never heard what happens when the ghosts start learning your little secrets. The hour you never speak of. The one door you always leave unlocked. That one mirror you can't bring yourself to cover. Tonight, 4 voices are stepping out of the shadows, and they've been watching you. They know your habits, they count your steps, they follow your patterns, they even know where you stand still the longest. As you listen, your own house might start to copy what you hear. A strange tap from under the stairs, a ring at an hour that doesn't exist. Your bed making room for someone you can't see. If something in your room answers back, don't say a word. Don't even whisper your name. Every one of these true tales leaves something behind, and it's looking for a piece of you. Stay with me, and whatever you do, try not to finish the count aloud. I used to count heads in the mirror after every stop. On the night she boarded, the mirror counted wrong. That's how I knew something on Route 44 had changed, and not in a way I could radio in and explain. I drive the graveyard run, a long loop of empty stops and orange lamps under the fog. I like it quiet. I like the hiss of the doors and the click of the fare box. After midnight, you get to know your bus like a person. It was raining, that slow rain that never seems to start or stop, just hangs there like breath. At the last public stop before the depot, I saw someone on the bench. She stood when I pulled up, her hair stuck flat to a pale face, the kind of wet that looks like it's soaked right into the bone. She climbed the steps without looking at me and dropped coins into the box. The metal chimed with a sound that felt older than the coins themselves. I glanced down. They weren't the ones people use now. They were dull and heavy and had a scent like old keys and river water. I said, "Last loop, depot after this. Where do you want to get off?" She didn't answer. Water dripped from her sleeve onto the rubber mat, steady as a metronome. She walked to the back and sat in the center of the rear bench, the seat nobody ever chooses. I watched her in the interior mirror as I pulled out. It showed her looking down, hair making a dark curtain. But for a split second, it also showed a second shape on the bench, like the reflection had a shadow within a shadow. I blinked, and it was gone. The bus hummed into the wet road. The wipers made a tired click. I hit the next stop out of habit, and the cord bell pinged once, cheerful and wrong, because I hadn't heard the cord move. I stopped anyway. The door sighed open. No one moved. But I felt that shift of weight that comes when someone stands, even though the mirror still showed the back bench heavy and bowed. The light turned green. The doors closed. I told myself she was just shy. I told myself not to turn around. You don't turn around when you drive a bus. You trust your mirrors. The road ran close to the river for about a mile. The railings there always held flowers tied with string. I never wanted to hear the story behind them. The windows started to fog from the inside, not with a steady haze, but in patches, as if someone's breath had touched them and moved away. A handprint bloomed on the glass near the back, too high for a child, too low for an adult sitting upright. It slid a little, the way a wet hand does when it loses strength. "Where are you getting off?" I asked, louder this time. The mirror showed her head turned just a fraction. I saw a line down her cheek like a healed cut, pale and shiny under the light. I told myself to be kind, to just keep driving. The bell pinged again as we rolled past the old bridge. The bus made a small cough and shudder. Not mechanical, more like a person trying to speak after being quiet for too long. The security monitor above my head, the one that's been dead for months, suddenly flickered with rain static. For a second, something dark leaned into the aisle on the screen, hair trailing, a hand on a seat back. I snapped my eyes back to the mirror. The bench was empty. The weight of the bus felt lighter. It felt like someone who had been holding their breath had finally left. I didn't stop. I rolled right through the next green light, and that's when I heard coins hit the fare box again. 1, then 2, then 3, each with a little ring. I didn't see a hand. The sound came from just behind my shoulder, so close. like someone had leaned in and let them fall. I pulled into a lay-by and set the brake. The bus settled with a sigh. The lights inside strobed once, very slow, as if the bus itself had just blinked. I stood up, holding the rail. Last stop soon. Anyone staying needs to say. The air just swallowed the words. The floor near the back glistened, a long wet trail leading under the rear bench. A single strand of dark hair lay stuck there, pointing to the row where nobody sat. I walked down the aisle. The rubber mat sucked at my shoes. Something was dripping under the bench, a steady rhythm that didn't belong to any leak I knew. I leaned down, lowering my head until my face was level with the seat, and from the shadows a second face looked back, close enough to fog my glasses with its breath. It was pale like the inside of a shell, its edges soft as if rubbed smooth by water. Hair floated where it should have hung. Her eyes didn't blink. They had that calm look people get when they've been cold for a long time. Her mouth was open just enough to breathe, but the sound that came out was the slow rush of a tide pulling back. I jerked up, hitting my shoulder on the seat. The bus lights flickered. The wipers dragged across the glass like tired hands. In the mirror, the back bench was empty again. The aisle looked clean, but I could see a shine on the rubber that wasn't from the rain. A slow spread like a wet outline left behind. "Do you want the bridge?" I asked, not sure if I was talking to her or the road. The speaker above my head clicked. The recorded voice that announces the next stop hesitated, then said nothing. Only a breath came through close to my ear, as if someone stood right behind my seat and leaned in. My hands found the wheel. The bus felt heavier, the engine's hum dropping a half step, like when it's full of passengers. My hand stuck to the wheel as if it were damp. Fog pressed up from the river, laying a flat sheet across the road. The rails of the bridge were a dark line in the mist. Flowers tied there lifted once in a little breath of wind and then hung still. I slowed down. The bell pinged, but the cord hadn't moved. It pinged again, before my foot even reached the brake. I opened the doors. A long, cold draft breathed out of the bus. Air moved past my knees and reached for my feet like it knew me. Steps came down the aisle. I didn't see who made them, but I could hear the rubber depress seat by seat. A weight paused behind me. Water dripped once from the top step to the road and made no splash. "End of the line," I said, my voice sounding distant. The steps didn't go forward. They turned and went back up the aisle. The bell pinged again, light and stubborn. I closed the doors. They sealed like lips that had been underwater too long. "Where?" I asked, so quiet I thought the bus wouldn't tell. A small handprint bloomed on the glass beside the priority seat, its fingers long and narrow. It pointed toward the north side of the bridge, to a stop we don't use anymore. Just a scar of paint on the curb and the ghost of letters on a pole. I drove us there. The bus hummed louder like it wanted to get this over with. Trees leaned over the walk. Beyond them, the river was just a thick, moving blackness. I set the brake. The doors opened by themselves. The air smelled like a damp coat left in a corner all season. She sat in the front seat. I hadn't seen her move. One moment empty, the next, a shape in a dark coat, hair like a veil across her face. She turned her head, not to me, but to the route number glowing on the display. It faltered, then shifted until it read, "Not in service." I hadn't touched it. "You missed me," she said. Or the bus said, or the air around my neck said. The words came with a cold on the back of my teeth. "I'm not the driver you think," I said. That wasn't me. Through her hair I saw a long, pale line down her cheek, the kind that doesn't bleed anymore. "You are now," she said. And my name came out of the speaker, not a call from dispatch, but a reply. I stood up. The floor felt tilted as if one side held more night than the other. I stepped into the stairwell. The cold gathered around my calves, squeezing gently. The river wasn't close enough for spray, but my shoes went dark anyway, and I smelled silt. "Please," I said. I don't know which one of us asked. The bell pinged 4 times, the same count as the coins that hit the fare box when she got on. I closed the doors and pulled away. The stop vanished behind us. The mirror showed nothing on the seats, but the weight in the bus stayed, settling over my shoulders like a wet coat. The fare box chimed once, soft, and something cold brushed my ear. A kiss that had never been warm. Back at the depot, I did my walkthrough. The aisle was dry, the seats were dry, but under the back bench was a pale line in the dust, the clean shape of a breath. And in the lost and found, next to a smoky scarf, lay 4 dull, heavy coins with a dampness that wouldn't wipe away, and a date our country never used. I still count heads in the mirror after every stop. Some nights it counts one more than I can see. Some nights the bell pings once at the bridge. I've learned how to open the doors when the air asks and how to close them when it begs. And I keep a towel under my seat for my shoes now. It never dries. I knew the house had a secret, because it breathed on me before it spoke. It was this thin, warm breath that just grazed my ankle on the very first night. A stream of air from the dark space under the stairs, like someone was hidden in there, exhaling softly, just to see if I would notice. I froze, my foot on the bottom step, keys still clutched in my hand. I didn't hear anything else, just the old house settling, the dry rustle of wood, and this faint, sweet smell, like old incense. I'd moved in because the rent was ridiculously cheap and the lane was quiet. The landlady, an older woman with a tight braid, had a strange way of looking past you, like she was counting ghosts behind your shoulder. She rushed me through the rooms, almost embarrassed by them. The cupboard under the stairs she kept locked. "Just for storage," she said. "The lock sticks after dark. Don't fuss with it at night." I laughed it off, promised I wouldn't. She gave me a smile without teeth and a heavy ring of keys. I'd been living alone for a year, so I knew my own noises. The click of the kettle, the hum of the fridge, the moan of a window in the wind. That first evening, I made tea and sat on the stairs. The light was warm there and the air smelled old, like a beloved bookshop. That's when I felt it. The breath on my ankle. I thought, maybe it's just a draft. I leaned down, placed my palm against the gap under the stair, and felt heat stroke my skin. It was like someone was inside, alive and quiet, close enough to kiss my wrist. That night, sleeping on a thin mattress in the front room, something knocked. It was around 2 a.m. 4 soft, precise knocks from inside the cupboard. It wasn't loud, just like knuckles on wood from a small distance away. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, telling myself it was just the pipes cooling, the old wood talking. Repeating the landlady's words, the lock sticks after dark. None of it helped. The next day, my neighbor, a man with oil on his hands, glanced at the house instead of me. "You moved in there?" he asked. "People don't stay long." I asked why. He just shrugged. "It's old. Old wood, old things." He looked at the staircase window, then at my keys. "Don't put your shoes in the stair cupboard," he added with a strange laugh. "They come back wet." He walked off before I could even react. That second night I heard the lock on the cupboard shiver, like it was turning itself. I walked into the hallway, touched the metal. It was warm, as if someone had been holding it. A new smell came from the gap, not just damp, but sweet sour, like flowers dying in a vase. I pressed my ear to the door and heard a slow sliding sound, like cloth being dragged across wood. I whispered, "Who's there?" The sound stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy, like someone on the other side was holding their breath. By the third morning, my shoes were wet. I'd left them by the front door, not in the cupboard. They were lined with grit, dark, as if they'd been pressed into damp soil. And inside the right shoe, 5 faint shapes in the dust, each one like a fingertip. I tried to reason it away. Maybe it was my own hand. Maybe the lane was muddy. Maybe the neighbor was just trying to spook me. But when I turned the shoe upside down, a tiny flake of red paint fell into my palm. It matched the inside of the stair cupboard door. I had to know. I took my breakfast to the stairs and just sat, watching the thin black gap at the bottom of the cupboard. After a few minutes, a faint line of warmth pushed out across the cold floor. My tea trembled in its cup, even though my hand was perfectly steady. "If someone is there," I said, my voice sounding wrong, "I can help." It felt like someone else was echoing me, just a half-second behind. I couldn't stand it anymore. I found the key for the old brass lock. It slid in too easily, like it had been used many times that night by hands that weren't mine. I turned it. The door opened an inch on its own, then stopped. I pushed. The wood resisted for a moment, then gave way with a sigh. A sick, sweet smell rolled out like scorched hair and old medicine. I shone my phone light inside. The space was deeper than it looked. The floor was dusty. I saw a small, broken plastic comb, and on the inside of the door, there were scratches. Not wild, but in neat rows, like someone had been marking the days. The space tightened into a dark corner and I couldn't see the back wall. It felt like it just kept going. I crouched and crawled one knee inside. The wood whispered against my shirt. Cold dust, tasting like old paper, filled my face. I reached for the comb. It felt like a safe, small thing to do. My light slid over something in the corner. It was a clump of hair, pressed flat and shiny on a nail as if it had been wet. The floor under my palm was warm in a perfect circle, like a hand had just been resting there, and then I heard it again, breathing, right beside my ear this time. The door clicked shut behind me. The sound was small, but it felt final. I shifted my knees on the dusty boards, trying to look back without scraping my face on the wood. Warm breath brushed my ear, the same low stream I had felt on my ankle on the first night, but now it was close enough to stir my hair. My phone light made a thin cone that died in a few feet, as if the darkness just ate it. I whispered, "Hello?" and heard my own voice answer me from an inch to my left, the same word, just a half-second late. When I reached for the door, the latch wouldn't move. The metal was warm, like a hand was still holding it on the other side. I told myself to keep my body small, not to breathe too loud. The gap ahead of me seemed to narrow, then open again, as if the space itself was alive. I could hear a soft sound from the far end, a wet, slow drip. As I crawled forward, the smell changed. It was less sweet and more like a vase that once held flowers and now only held the brown, stagnant water. Something gently tugged a hair from my sleeve. It wasn't a hard pull. It was like the way a child tries to get your attention. The inside of the door had marks I had missed at first glance. They were in neat, careful rows, 4 straight lines over and over, with a 5th line crossing through each set. The last row had only 4 lines, without the cross. My phone light slid to the far end where the boards were missing. In their place was a shallow hollow, and the blackness below. It wasn't empty. It had a skin that moved. When my light hit it, it shivered. Liquid, not deep, but enough to make a ripple. I said, "Please, I do not want to hurt you." The same sentence came back, whispered into my hair, but it was missing one word. It said, "Please, I do want you." A soft knock tapped from behind me. Once, then again, then twice more. 4 in total, the same pattern I had heard at 2 in the morning. My hand lifted before I even knew it, fingers crooked to knock on the wood. I stopped, my knuckles a breath away. I needed light and a plan. I set the phone between my teeth to free my hands. The old comb at the back of the space caught my eye. It was brittle, but I took it. I fitted a broken tooth into the thin mouth of the latch and pushed. The comb bent, it cracked, but the latch shifted. I pressed harder and heard the comb break. The sound was small, but the dark listened. The breath at my ear moved to my wrist. I leaned my weight against the door, bracing my left hand on the wood for leverage. My ring scraped across the 4 careful lines of that last unfinished row. A shallow accidental cut connected them, a 5th stroke, slanting through. The air changed. It was like the space took a deep breath for the first time in years. The warm patch under my palm went cold in a second. The water under the broken boards made a sound like someone lifting a heavy, wet cloth. Something touched my ankle. It wasn't a hand, as I know hands. It was more like hair and water gathered into a shape that had learned how to hold. I kicked back, and my heel met something soft that moved and then set itself again. The latch popped. The door opened a finger's width. I drove my shoulder into it and fell into the hallway, my cheek hitting the cold tile. The door between the stairs and me was open only as wide as my palm. Something pressed from the other side, testing the air. Footsteps creaked above. The landlady's shadow passed over the frosted glass at the top of the stairs. She didn't call my name. She just stood there for a long moment. Then the shadow moved away. The hall went quiet, except for the faint drip I now heard from inside the cupboard, steady as a clock. I left the door just like that. I packed in the morning without sleeping. For 2 weeks in my new flat, nothing happened. I told myself it was just stress. But on the 15th night, I woke at 2 to a sound I knew. 4 soft knocks. Not on my front door. They came from the walk-in cupboard by my kitchen. The air moved across my ankles as if I'd stepped into a warm draft. I said, "Hello?" The word came back from near my shoulder, a half-second behind, missing a different word this time. In the morning, my sneakers were wet. Inside the left one, 5 little ovals were marked in dust, like fingertips. On the cupboard wall, 4 neat lines were scratched into the paint low near the floor. The 5th line was there too, but lighter, as if it was still being drawn. That evening I found the broken comb from the old house in my cutlery drawer. I sleep with the cupboard door open now, which feels like a mistake. It breathes on my ankles when I pass. And sometimes, when I put my palm on the frame for balance, I feel the wood warm in a circle under my hand, like a smaller hand has found the same spot from the other side and is holding on, patiently waiting for me to finish the count. The first time the dead called my desk, I thought it was a prank. I was working night security at our town's old hospital, the year it was closing down for good. I sat in this small office just off the main lobby, with a radio, a set of keys, and a landline that ran on the building's old internal network. Most of the wings were already empty. The entire basement ward was sealed. I had a map with these thick red X marks all over it, and strict orders to keep the doors locked and the lights off. The call came a little after 2 in the morning. The handset started rattling on the desk like it was shivering. The display just showed a 4-digit extension I didn't recognize. I picked up and said, "Security." There was nothing, just the low hum of a fan and a click, a wet sound like a tongue pressing against the roof of a mouth. I hung up and checked the directory binder. The extension belonged to the basement nurses' station. It was listed as disconnected. I told myself it was just the switchboard glitching. The building was ancient. The wires were old. The floor lights in the lobby would do this slow pulse that always made me think of a sleeping lung. Then the call came again. I let it ring twice before picking up. This time, I heard breathing, a real struggle, like someone was trapped under a heavy blanket. I asked, "Who is this?" A woman's voice, very soft, said, "Come down." The voice was so close to the receiver, it was like her lips were touching the plastic. And then, I heard a second voice, far away, a muffled echo, saying the exact same thing. The line went dead. I tried to radio my partner, who was stationed across the building by the old pharmacy. He didn't answer. The radio just hissed, like water hitting a hot pan. I tried again. Still nothing. The landline rang a 3rd time. My hand was shaking. I picked it up and said, "If this is a joke, I'm calling the cops." The woman on the other end just sighed. It was a sound that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. She said, "It is very cold. Please." I told myself I could just go down to the basement lobby, check the main corridor, and come right back. I grabbed the big silver keyring and stepped out into the hall. The building felt different at night. The air tasted like old bleach and paper. My shoes clicked on the floor in this long, empty way that made me start to hate the sound. I passed rooms that still had beds in them, all stripped and bare. I passed a vending machine. Its light was off. There was this feeling around the machine, like someone had been standing there in the dark, just staring into a light that never came on. The stairwell leading down to the basement smelled like wet plaster. My flashlight beam cut through the thick dust, making it look alive like a swarm of insects. The door at the bottom needed 2 keys. My hands were fumbling so much the keys were trying to run away on the ring. And that's when I heard it. A slow, dragging sound on the other side of the door, as if someone was pulling a long, frayed rope across the floor. I told myself it was just a water line releasing pressure. I told myself a lot of small lies that fit perfectly like buttons into their holes. I finally got the door open and was hit by air so cold it made my throat ache. The basement wasn't totally dark. A few lights were on, scattered, making these little islands of light across the corridor. I could see the nurse's station right from the doorway. The chairs were all turned to face the wall. A rolling stool was lying on its side, and the phone on that desk, it was off the hook. The cord was pulled tight and twisted, like someone had been fighting with it. I started walking toward it. As I got closer, I heard this tiny, wet drive of whispering coming from somewhere down the hall, like words being chewed. The phone on the nurse's station was dead. I set it back on its cradle, and I just felt watched. The whispering stopped. I started backing up, step by quiet step. Then the phone behind me rang. I flinched so hard the flashlight slipped from my hand and hit my knee. The sound was thin, like the ringer had dust in its throat. It was a wall phone next to a treatment room door, the kind with a long gray cord. I picked it up. You just do, when something rings in the dark like that. The cold of the receiver stung my ear. At first I only heard air. Then, underneath it, the faint, steady beat of a heart monitor that had no business running. A woman whispered, "You came down." She was close again, her lips on the plastic, her breath fogging the mouthpiece. I asked, "Who are you?" And the same sentence came back at me, delayed and warped in my own voice. "Who are you?" It sounded like it was recorded in a room full of blankets. The lights flickered once and came back on. The chairs at the nurse's station had changed. They weren't facing the wall anymore. They were turned toward me, polite and patient, as if they were waiting their turn. The rolling stool that had been on its side? It was now standing upright, about 2 feet to my left. I hadn't heard it move. Not a sound. The phone in my hand clicked again. That wet tongue sound. The woman whispered, "Not that way, turn around." I didn't. I could feel something standing in the doorway of the treatment room just out of sight, as if it needed me to lean in first. I stepped sideways instead, keeping my eyes locked on the station. Another phone rang, farther down the hall, then another, farther still. The sound was moving away from me, trying to lead me somewhere. The dragging sound started again, and I realized it wasn't a rope. It was phone cords being pulled tight along the floor. I tried my radio again. It came alive with a thin voice that wasn't my partner's. It said, "Basement 2. Basement 2. The same words, but with a different, awful meaning. I said my partner's name into the radio. It repeated his name back to me in a whisper that was not mine. The phones down the hall all rang together, then stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard wheels. Slow. Not a gurney. A cradle. I forced myself to look at the glass window of a room marked Isolation. The room itself was empty, but in the reflection I could see the corridor behind me. I watched myself standing there holding the phone. And I watched something else too. In the reflection, a figure stood directly behind me, not touching me, just pressed up close like a shadow with bones. It had a hospital phone pressed where its mouth should be. The cord went down its neck across its chest and disappeared out of frame. The receiver in my hand grew damp. I spun around. There was no one there. The air smelled like a wet bandage that had been left on for too long. My hands were shaking so hard the keys chimed like tiny bells as I fumbled with the basement door. It wouldn't open. It was locked. The woman on the phone whispered, "Please, stay. It is very cold." Her voice doubled again, that far-off echo saying the same words a half-beat behind, like a child repeating their mother. Then all the phones rang at once. Every door, every wall. The sound was a solid, physical thing. I picked up the nearest one and just barked into it. "What do you want?" The line filled with the sound of my own ragged breath. Then my own voice spoke, but it wasn't a repeat, it wasn't delayed. It was me, desperate and shaking, saying, "Oh, please, come down." I left the handset hanging there, swinging back and forth. I don't really remember getting out. I remember the elevator doors sliding open on their own, in a building where the power was supposed to be mostly off. I remember running, and the long, empty sound of my own footsteps being chased by 100 small, ringing bells. When I finally got back to my desk, the landline was off the hook. The display said the call was still connected, to the basement nurses' station. I quit that week. The hospital closed for good. They turned it into office buildings that now sit empty. But the calls, they didn't stop. My cell phone rang at 2 in the morning about a month later. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally played it, I heard it. The hum, the click that sounds like a tongue, and my own voice, whispering, "I am so cold. Please, come down." I didn't buy the mirror. It felt like the mirror bought me. That's how it all began, with this pull I still can't explain without feeling like someone is watching me. I found it at a small estate sale, just down the street. The house belonged to a widow who had no children, and the whole place smelled of dried flowers and old soap. The mirror was leaning against a hallway wall, tucked between boxes of porcelain dolls and a tin of buttons. It was tall enough to show me from head to toe, with a dark wooden frame carved with these intricate vines that looked almost alive. The glass itself was old, speckled with tiny black marks as if it had been awake for a very, very long time. Honestly, I wasn't even there for a mirror. I was looking for a lamp I didn't need. But every time I glanced over, the mirror showed me a version of the room that felt off. Just a half second behind reality. My smile in the reflection hesitated before it showed up on my actual face. When I blinked, my reflection was slow to catch up. I just figured I was tired. I asked the woman running the sale if the mirror had a story. She just said, "We found it behind a curtain in the back bedroom. We didn't even know she had it." Then she shrugged. You know, in that way people do when they want to get rid of something that gives them the creeps. She added, "Just don't use ammonia on it, it eats the silvering." I nodded, paid cash, and carried it home by myself. It felt heavier than it should have, but not in a way that makes your arms ache. It was a weight that sat right in your chest. The second I set it against my hallway wall, the entire apartment felt different. The air itself seemed to have learned a new, unsettling trick. I texted my sister a picture, joking, "Old thing followed me home." She sent back a thumbs up and said, "Don't let it watch you sleep." I laughed it off, but I still leaned the mirror so it faced the hallway and not my bedroom. I told myself that counted as listening. That evening I walked past it a dozen times, And the small things kept getting weirder. My reflection would keep walking for a split second after I'd stopped. The light in the glass looked colder, dimmer, and there was this damp smell hanging around the frame. Not like mildew, but like wet hair that's been under a hat for too long. I wiped the top edge and found a faint, pale smear under the dust, right where a forehead would rest if someone leaned there every night. I tried to rub it off, but it wouldn't budge. It just grew fainter, as if the mirror didn't want me to erase what it was keeping. Around 2 a.m, I woke up to a sound that made no sense. It was the soft, dry rasp of a finger on glass. I lay there, frozen, staring at the dark hallway where the mirror held a dull glow from the streetlights outside. "Hello?" I said, "because what else do you do?" I got up and stood in front of it. My reflection looked unsure. I lifted my right hand. My reflection slowly raised its left. I dropped my hand, but the reflection held its there for a long second before letting it fall. My tired brain was just playing tricks on me, right? Fear makes you do petty things, so I grabbed a marker and drew a small dot on my right cheek, a way to track what was real. I stood in front of the mirror again. The dot was on the left in the glass where it should be, but as I watched, it wavered. It moved just a tiny bit lower, as if someone on the other side had smudged it. Then, a smell I couldn't place at first. Powder, faint flowers and heat, like an old-fashioned perfume. It pressed in close, then faded as if someone had just walked past me. That's when I grabbed my phone. I needed a witness, even a digital one. I started recording, standing off to the side. The mirror showed me wearing my old college hoodie, but I looked down. I was wearing a t-shirt. I looked back at my phone screen. The reflection stared back, hoodie on, its lips moving my name without a sound. I stopped the recording and watched the clip. In the video, the streetlight outside flickered out. It hadn't done that in real time. In the video, as I stepped away, my reflection stayed put for an extra heartbeat, head tilted, listening. Then, a low shape moved behind it in the glass, dragging a hand along the wall. I spun around. My own hallway was empty. I played it again, turning the volume all the way up. A soft, thin whisper right next to the mic. It either said, "Stay," or it said, "Stain." I couldn't be sure. I decided to lay the mirror flat on the living room floor for the night. I reached for the frame. The wood was warm. The warmth moved to match my palm like a hand pressed from the other side. I leaned closer and the mirror leaned closer too. My reflection lifted its hand to my throat, but my own hands never moved. A chilling cold pressed against my skin in the exact shape of fingers, careful and light, as if measuring the distance. The glass fogged in ovals that matched the touch. I could see the prints from both sides of the glass, one real, one remembered. I swallowed, and I felt the pressure follow the movement in my throat. The frame of the mirror gave a small creak, like a bed that has held too many long, sleepless nights. I whispered, "Do not," though I wasn't even sure what I was trying to stop. My reflection shaped the same word, but its mouth moved a moment later than mine, like a delayed feed, like someone trying to be polite while listening to a painful story. I took a step back, but the mirror didn't give me any distance. It seemed to lean forward on its own, showing my face bigger, my breath louder. I noticed a faint line running down my reflection's throat, as if a necklace had been pressed there for years. I touched my own neck. There was nothing there but the cold. Just then my phone buzzed. My sister's name lit up the screen. I answered, keeping my eyes locked on the glass. "Please talk," I whispered. She sounded confused. "You called me," she said. "No," I replied. "You called me." Then a small noise came through the speaker, a dry scraping sound like a finger dragging on glass, so close it made the mic crackle. My sister went quiet. Then she asked, "Are you in the hall? I can hear you breathing in a funny way." I was in the hall, and I was breathing. But the slow, careful sound she heard wasn't mine. It was the sound of someone practicing not to be heard and failing. I hung up. Fear makes you rude. I grabbed a blanket and threw it at the mirror. It should have covered the glass. But in the reflection, the blanket flew past my face and landed on the floor behind me, as if there was a draft inside the mirror world that I couldn't feel out here. In my world, the blanket hit the frame and slid to my feet. In the mirror, it lay on a floor with a faint pattern I didn't recognize, like old kitchen tiles. I tried to lay the mirror flat on the floor, but it resisted, leaning into my hands like a person trying to keep their balance. The glass bulged slightly under my palms, rising and falling like a sigh under a shirt. There was a warm spot, right where a forehead might have rested, and the smell of perfume, sweet but turned a little sour, like flowers left in water for too long. I don't know why I did it, but I pressed my own forehead against that pale smear on the glass. It felt like warm breath on the other side was trying to find my bones. Pictures that weren't mine flooded my head. A hand with a ring touching a curtain, a dirty cup in a sink, a pair of shoes pointed at a door that wouldn't open. The mirror didn't show me these things. It put them inside me, the way a smell can pull you back through time. A fingernail tapped in the corner of the frame. 5 careful times. The 5th tap paused, then dragged into a short line. I lifted my head, but my reflection didn't. It stayed there. Brow pressed to the glass, eyes closed, mouth open as if it were counting something. I finally managed to push the mirror flat. It lay on the floor like a shallow pool of water reflecting the ceiling, but the reflection was off. I saw myself leaning over it, but the me in the mirror turned her head and looked past my shoulder. I followed her gaze. There was no one behind me. But in the glass, a figure stood at the end of the hall, low and slow, with one hand on the wall. It was the same shadow from that video, clearer now. Hair brushing the paint, leaving a thin, wet trail. I wanted to run. The front door was 5 steps away. I took 1 step. My reflection took 3. It rose from the glass and stood as if climbing out of a pool. It lifted its left hand. I lifted my right. It smiled, a soft, tired smile that I don't know how to make. Its lips shaped a word. It looked like stay. Or maybe stain. I'm not brave. I dragged the mirror behind the couch and leaned it face first against the wall. I taped a towel over the back, just in case. That night I slept on the floor. In the morning, there were 4 short scratches on the wall paint where the frame had moved. A 5th line was scratched through them, lighter, as if it was still being written. The towel was damp in a circle the size of a forehead. I keep the mirror covered now, always facing the wall. But it has learned to show me things anyway. Sometimes when I look in any other mirror, I see myself hesitate for a fraction of a second and look past my own shoulder with a tired smile that isn't mine. And if I listen closely to the covered mirror at night, the wood warms under my ear and a breath moves through the towel like it knows my name. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had an experience you can't explain, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange tales. Stay safe out there.